98.1 FM and AM 1220. All local, all day.
Thank you, KHTS.
Your hometown station, KHTS.
Good evening, Santa Clarita. Welcome in. You are listening to KHTS, your hometown station, 98.1 FM and 1220 AM. This is a very special edition of SCVI Charter School's Eye on the Valley. I am Matt Watson, your host, and I'm joined tonight by licensed marriage and family therapist Christina DeBray. Good evening, Christina.
Good evening.
It's good to have you in the studio. You know, you're on our regular morning show just about every day. It's nice to have you in here. Well, we're bringing you this special edition of Eye on the Valley this evening because we've got some very important things, some very serious things that we want to talk to you about. We're calling this show. What are we calling it, Christina? Working toward closure. Finding closure. I knew it had to do with closure. And I couldn't find it. It's finding closure. You know, we've now closed the school year, 2019-2020. And, you know, that scream there in the middle of June was just a little bit more faint this year, not quite as strong as, you know, the kids and teachers normally are when they shout for summer break. And, you know, we're easing into summer break now, and most of us are there. But as we look back on the school year, we realize how much our community's been through. We realize how much our kids have been through. Our kids have been through so much over this last 8-10 months. You know, we started with the fires in late September and October. I say fires, those of you that remember, and I'm sure most of you do. There were multiple fires here in Santa Clarita, and you know, I'm always amazed at the firefighters and what they're able to do, the work that they do to keep those fires away from structures and homes. But heartbreakingly, we weren't able to save everybody's home this fall. There were quite a few people that lost their homes that were either damaged or completely burnt. And, you know, as we were stepping out of fire season and we all breathed a little bit of a sigh of relief, we were hit by something that, you know, none of us could have expected, although I think a lot of our kids were telling us that we probably should have. On the morning, about 7:30 in the morning, November 14th, we experienced the devastating Saugus High School shooting, where we tragically lost 3 students and several others were injured, but just about everybody on and associated with the campus that day was changed forever. And man, our community came together, and after a few weeks, when our kids finally got back to school at Saugus High School, we breathed a bit of a sigh of relief again, thinking, you know, this is about as bad as it can get, right? How much worse could it get? And we need to learn to stop asking that question, because as we got into spring, we were hit with this pandemic, this health scare, followed by quarantine, followed by economic crisis. And it has just been devastating to so many people in so many different ways, right? People experience these different traumas, Christina, in a lot of different ways. And then, you know, as we were pulling out of that and hope on the horizon, stores and businesses starting to reopen and people starting to venture outside of their homes, we then witnessed the tragic murder of George Floyd on television, and that's something that nobody should ever have to see. But at the same time, we don't want to shy our eyes away from the devastating effects of police brutality. And so following that, we had social protests in some of the larger cities here in the United States, including in Los Angeles. We saw riots and looting, and we had scares of our own here in Santa Clarita. Fortunately, as we do here in Santa Clarita, our citizens did an amazing job of keeping things meaningful, keeping things positive and strong. But there were folks that were traumatized by the scares. Lots of businesses boarded up around town, things like that. And, you know, there was even comparatively smaller things going on, even following those things, you know, from a teacher being arrested at Saugus High School, another person associated with Saugus High School saying something rather regrettable and scary on social media that rattled a lot of people. And then let's not forget everything that individuals have been through, all of life's normal ups and downs. Through this course of the last 8 to 10 months, families have gone through divorce. People have gotten sick. People have died. There have been car accidents. Lots of them out on our roadways here in Santa Clarita yesterday. So Christina, we as a community, we've been through so much. Our kids have been through so much, and our hope tonight was to try to get some of that closure. So where do we start?
Well, first, I think what can be helpful is to understand the different kinds of trauma and how they impact us individually and as a community. So when we experience trauma, our stress response becomes engaged. And that is healthy and adaptive because that's what's going to help us, when a bear is chasing us or when we're being shot at. And when trauma becomes PTSD or a related diagnosis, it's when that stress response persists and doesn't go away. It's kind of like it becomes a broken record. So here's the challenge is, a lot of, we call big T trauma, big life-threatening trauma. And then we have little t trauma like, getting forgotten to pick up, your parents forgetting to pick you up from school, or someone getting you, buying you a snack that you're allergic to, or something like that. That's
okay.
not.
So it's all comparative. So like that big T trauma would be obviously the Saugus shooting. That was a big T trauma for most of us.
That is for sure a big T trauma. And,
right.
Unless you're somebody that, maybe you're in combat and you experience shooting on a regular basis and it becomes normal to you. It
becomes old hat, yeah.
So what happens is, we experience the trauma and, our minds try and process it. And when we experience one trauma, it's called single episode trauma. So the challenge that we're now in is that we have what's called complex trauma.
Sure. We
have an overload of all kinds of T's, big T trauma, little t trauma, middle T trauma. I mean, it's grown exponentially. We have the obvious big T's of the fires, losing homes. Let's not forget about Colby dying. Mm-hmm. And that, for a lot of people, that was a big T, or, a medium T. And then we had the coronavirus and it's hard to even remember everything that's happened because it's been so extensive. Like, remember that one time that there were fires in Australia?
Right. It
that was at one point the biggest story of the year.
Yeah.
And so our stress response keeps getting surged, right? It's like a power surge. And so what happens is it's one thing if it happens once, but when it keeps happening over and over and over again, our information processing system that we have becomes overwhelmed. So when we experience information, when we're learning, when you go out and you're tasting an orange, you pick up that orange, you smell it, and you can learn or you understand, hey, this is an orange because you've encountered oranges before, or you know what an orange is, okay. And it goes, your mind does a Google search, hey, what is this orange thing? Oh, it's an orange. So the reason that we have that is because as we experience things in our life and we learn about information, it gets categorized into our brain as normal narrative memory. So this is an orange, that is an apple, this is a grape, okay? Just sort of matter-of-fact things. I had a piece of toast for breakfast. When information comes in that is a threat to our safety, big, scary, overwhelming, things that we maybe have never experienced before, things that threaten our livelihood, we can often struggle, our information processing system often struggles with how to categorize and organize that information and store it within ourselves in a way that's accessible, in in a helpful way. And so what happens is it sort of this is where the stress response keeps perseverating, is that that threat just sort of stays in the queue, that memory of the threat, and then you lose the ability to discern between real and perceived threat. So, for example, if you have PTSD from the Saga shooting, when you hear a loud bang, like, something fell on the floor, or a soda can explodes, or a firework goes off, you lose the ability to discern between a real and a perceived threat, and the past is always present.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I remember my son Pars, he just graduated Saugus High School, and it was several weeks after the shooting. There was one of the maintenance carts driving around campus, and they accidentally drove over some trash, including an empty plastic water bottle that exploded. Now, that's probably happened a million times throughout high school campuses around the world, and no one really thinks much about it. Obviously, a loud noise will startle anyone. That's one of the only two things that we're actually born with. The fear is loud noises and falling. And so you get startled, but then, like you said, your brain goes through that catalog of, loud noises. What could that be? Could be a balloon popping. Could be, somebody stepped on a milk carton, or, any one of a number of things that we've heard make a loud bang like that. And so our brain kind of sorts and categorizes it. But what actually did happen, you're saying can happen frequently, whether it's with noises or smells, things like that. When this cart rolled over the plastic water bottle and it exploded, of course, everyone within earshot, it immediately kind of came up in that Google search in their brain as, my life is in imminent danger now.
Yeah. Well, and you develop a sense of functional paranoia because it's difficult to interpret stimuli. I know we talked before of, it's like you lose the ability to know, hey, is this a bear chasing me, or is this just an ant? And it's very, even though that might seem silly to someone who hasn't experienced trauma, or if you're not a person who's living with the effects of trauma, you might be looking at that person like, hey, why are you being so ridiculous right now? Like, there's no bear here. There's no shooting. So you need to just calm down, and unfortunately it doesn't work like that because it's a body response and it just gets ignited. And that's in an attempt to self-preserve.
It's interesting. I'm kind of sort of going through my own brain right now, and I got a little emotional. The day of the Saugus shooting, I was actually out of state. I was traveling for business, and found out by phone and text message what was going on, and that began a whole about a 36-hour ordeal trying to get home. And it's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it. I haven't traveled since then. Well, of course not. Right after the shooting was the holidays, followed by COVID and quarantine, and that we still haven't fully come out of. So of course I haven't traveled, but I don't know what's it going to be like, as I hop on an airplane the next time and leave my son. So people are dealing with that. I've seen my son deal with that when he says goodbye to his friends come over and visit at the house. It's a little bit harder than it used to be when they go away, because he's got that notion of, when will I see them again?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Matt. I think that one of the challenges that we're dealing with right now is, when you have to be living in the regular world, and as you go throughout your life, trauma can hit, grief can hit. And so right now we are very locked down and locked in with COVID. And so our world has become significantly smaller, our individual worlds. We're not exposed to that many people or experiences. We're not at theme parks that can trigger trauma or PTSD. We're not traveling. And so people may feel like, oh, hey, I've dealt with my trauma, or I've come to terms with it. And then, things start happening. So for example, there's the anniversary effect. I see this all the time in my practice, is that it will be an anniversary of the trauma, or it can be something like someone's birthday or something like that. And all of a sudden, they start getting depressed, they start getting anxious, they start having a resurgence of symptoms, and they have no idea why. And it's because your body remembers. Your body keeps score of everything that's going on, and it's, part of the grief in this is knowing that you have to now close the chapter on being able to get on a plane and just take it for granted, that you'll see your son at some point in the future. You now always will have to live with the reality of, I'm always going to be afraid that I'll never be able to see my son every time I get on an airplane. And that's a grief piece. Yeah. And that's a loss that we are all being confronted with right now.
Yeah, it is, and it's interesting because at the same time, you're right. I currently live with that, and I don't anticipate a time where I'm not going to be able to do that. But at the same time, you get into the day-to-day, the hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute life, and it's not that you forget about things, but it's almost like a can't see the forest for the trees kind of sensation that I'm working with my son and countless families out there going through the same things of, this is what we're doing today. I need you to unload the dishwasher. I need you to, clean your room or in our case, apply for that student loan. And like I said, you don't forget, but you don't take into account everything that he's going through. So can you kind of help us as parents step back and take a look at what our kids have been through over the last few months? Where are they at right now?
So when we experience things, it does take 3 to 6 months to consolidate memory. So that's really important, especially when we're talking about trauma, because that's when you can get the delayed onset of symptoms. One of the things that we can see is that sometimes people can function very well after a traumatic event. Mm-hmm. And then 3 to 6 months down the line, all of a sudden, they start regressing. You might interpret them as procrastinating more, being lazy, being on edge. And it's very easy to look at a teenager and just say, oh, well, they're having a tude, or something like that. But remember that, we're at the 7-month mark after this. And so, some people are just a month into that memory is being consolidated. And you can start to see delayed symptoms that are being present now. And the other challenge of where we are right now is, everything else that's happened since the Saugus shooting.
Yeah, all those layers that you get on top of that.
All of this, right? Like George Floyd, coronavirus, political unrest, riots. Mm-hmm. Our safety has been threatened. If you remember early on in this year, there was a point where we didn't even know if we were going to have toilet paper to use when we went to the restroom, right? Or groceries. I'll never forget being in a grocery store and staring at the empty shelves. It felt like out of a movie or something like that. It was
that itself was traumatizing.
It's scary.
We're blessed that many of us have never lived through a circumstance like that, where you go to the supermarket and the stuff that you're ready to buy just isn't there. It is scary, and those are some important points for us as parents to understand, is where our kids are at and how they're starting to process all of those different layers of things that are being piled on top of them, especially now as we head into the summer and our kids don't have as much to do. I want to talk about that and what parents can expect and how we can handle it going forward. Let's take a quick commercial break, and we'll talk about that when we come back. You're listening to a very special edition of SCVI Charter Schools Eye on the Valley, Finding Closure, with licensed marriage and family therapist Christina DeBray and Matt Watson on your hometown station, KHTS.
Your hometown station, KHTS.
Welcome back. You're listening to KHTS, your hometown station, 98.1 FM and 1220 AM. This is a very special edition, an evening edition of SCVI Charter Schools Eye on the Valley. This is Finding Closure. I'm Matt Watson, and we're working this evening with licensed marriage and family therapist Christina DeBray. And I actually did want to mention, Christina, you are a bit more than a licensed marriage and family therapist. You're a trauma specialist. You also are a certified specialist in EMDR therapy, which we've talked about on our regular show, on our morning show, that can help us really plow through and help our brain sort those memories. You said, some of these traumas, they get hard for our brain to sort and categorize. Well, that EMDR therapy that you provided, I've been paying attention when you call in. EMDR helps us sort and categorize those things, and it really does help eliminate some of those symptoms of even some of the strongest traumas. We were talking before the break about where our kids are at right now, and with everything that's happened this school year, from fires, school shooting, pandemic, protests, plus all the other crud that goes along with normal life. I didn't get to go to my prom. Sure, I got to graduate high school, but I had to do it in the backseat of my dad's car. All those different things. And then also, my best friend moved away, or whatever other traumas come with growing up. So now, school year's over. We kind of closed that chapter, and I know a lot of families have breathed again another sigh of relief. But you were saying before the break that it can take 3 to 6 months for us to really process, absorb, and start to show some symptoms of these complex traumas, these traumas with a capital T. So what can families expect as we move forward into this summer?
It really can vary so much, and there's so many other factors built into that. Some people really distract by, just being so busy all the time that they want to keep themselves so busy because they can't stand being alone. The other people will cope by using substances. You can see sometimes what I see with clients is just a lot of unexplained medical problems and physical ailments. So people will go from doctor to doctor trying to get a diagnosis for something that they can't get a diagnosis from.
So this emotional trauma will actually start to manifest in physical pains and ailments.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. So, when your stress response is chronically engaged, which is what happens when you have unprocessed trauma and complex trauma, you're constantly releasing stress hormones in your body. And so you have cortisol running through your body, and you're going to start having problems. You're going to start getting migraines. You're going to start, your chest is going to hurt. You're going to get stomach aches. There are endless ways that it can manifest. And even if you have underlying conditions, like, for example, I have cystic fibrosis and type 1 diabetes. Those, I can tell when I experience trauma, those two things get worse for me. I will actually need more insulin when I'm under stress, because it, my body becomes more resistant to insulin. So, it can manifest in so many ways. You can see secondary diagnoses such as depression and anxiety, feeling worried, difficult to control worries. We talked before about, measuring your kids. So one of the things that I do in my practice is a quick scale, 0 to 10, 0 being totally calm, zen, at peace, 10 being the worst you've ever felt in your entire life. And just check in with your kids and see where they are. Now, if you're chronically above a 6 or more, you are in the danger zone. You need to get help immediately, because that can really go to a place of crisis very easily. And, sometimes people are in that 6, 7, 8 zone, and they're just so good at just getting through the day that you don't even realize it. So have an open conversation with your kids and ask them on a regular basis. It's okay if they have an 8 or 9 moment, but if they're just chronically at that place, that's a problem. Really, if you're below a 4 on a regular basis, that's okay. If you're between a 4 and a 6, or that's when you really need to start thinking about getting help. And if you're above a 6, you absolutely need to get help. immediately.
Okay. And so it may take practice working on that with our kids. One of the things that I've found very important with my son is to stress to him to be honest with himself, to be honest with me. I realize you're really mad at me because I won't let you go out tonight. But be honest, where are you at with your stress right now? And again, it takes time because obviously, we all know our teenagers without all the trauma that we've dealt with over this last year. When I won't let, when you don't let your kid go out at night, immediately they'll tell you, I'm at an 11 right now. I'm so mad at you, right? But you teach them to be honest with themselves. I thought it was really interesting that you talked about the medical or the physical manifestation of that emotional pain. So parents need to remember that your kid is probably not faking it when they're experiencing pain that the doctor can't figure out. It's important to get them to the doctor, have them checked out, but also make sure that they let their doctor know. He was on the campus of Saugus High School when this happened, or he was in a train wreck and is dealing with that trauma from 2 months ago, or whatever it may be. That a medical doctor is well aware of the emotional traumas that they've been through. What are some other symptoms that we need to keep an eye on? As I don't want parents to be hypersensitive that, again, to go back to the same example, I didn't give my kid permission to do what they wanted to do, so they flip out. I don't want parents to be hypersensitive that, okay, we need to rush off to get some mental health care. But at the same time, I want parents to know what they should be looking for, what they should keep an eye on. And then when we start seeing multiple symptoms, when we start seeing that they're reoccurring, then we need to check in and get some support. So what are some of those symptoms?
So there really are yellow flags and then red flags.
Okay.
So when you see the yellow flags, it's about time and about number. So if you see a lot of these over a period of time that's 14 days or more, this would be a red flag. So difficulty sleeping, difficulty staying asleep, having nightmares, having a loss of appetite or a gain in appetite. You can see either a lot of weight gain or a lot of weight loss. Loss of interest in things that they normally find enjoyable, avoiding things that they normally find enjoyable, avoiding family or friends, feeling lonely, feeling fatigued, feeling sad, a loss of pleasure or satisfaction in their life. So if you're seeing a lot of those flags, if you're seeing 5 or more of those flags persist for 14 days or more, that's when you want to think about talking to someone about that. Okay. Now, there are red flags where even if there's just one red flag, you want to get help immediately. So that would be any jokes about suicidality or homicide, self-harm, substance use underage. Okay. Or excessive substance use at any age. Those I think are really the big ones, the suicidality and self-harm. And when we talk about suicidality, I think parents just get so scared of, my kid's definitely not feeling suicidal. I gave a talk at one of the local high schools one time, and the teacher interrupted me and said, we live in the Santa Clarita Valley. Our kids don't really deal with these kinds of things. Right. And after that class was done, I had 5 kids out of that class come and speak to me personally about how they were feeling suicidal. Mm-hmm. And so don't think that, just because your kid, I hear this all the time, my kid has a great life, they're privileged, or, hey, they weren't at the Saugus shooting, or, they were called in sick that day, or, to school. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. Yeah, you never know what your kid's got going on in their mind, in their heart. So these are important things to keep our eye on. Now, what are some things that we can do at home, to help our kids continue to process things in a healthy way? What can we do when we see that we're getting a little bit above a 4, they're having trouble sleeping, stressing out a little bit? What can we do at home to help them? The best thing that you can do for your kids is to role model for them how you'd like for them to handle things. So if you're not handling things right, if you're not taking care of yourself, then this is, no matter what you do, it's going to be an extremely hard challenge. So we've talked before about putting your own oxygen mask on first. And this is just absolutely critical. So modeling self-care, the basics, getting the proper amount of sleep, getting up on a regular schedule, taking a shower, brushing your teeth. These things might seem really basic, but when you experience trauma, depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, they can become extremely arduous to do. The idea of taking a shower and brushing your hair is exhausting. Everything is exhausting when you're depressed. So that would be the number one thing. Also, holding space is so huge. When your kid, we talked before about how some kids will manifest with physical symptoms. One of the reasons that can be is that physical symptoms tend to be more socially acceptable than mental health symptoms. So when we say, oh, I'm feeling sad, a lot of times we say, yeah, but you have your puppy here and you have your mommy here and you're with all your friends. Why are you feeling sad? You don't need to feel sad. And so then how that will go down the road is that sadness doesn't go away. So it becomes internalized and it becomes, oh, I'm having a stomach ache. Oh, my chest is hurting. Oh, I'm feeling tired. And then we tend to be more responsive to that. So when your kids or teens tell you, I'm feeling sad or angry, just thank you for sharing that with me. I'm here for you. Let me know what I can do to support you.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, but not moving on, not blowing it off. Yep. Let's be sad.
And don't say or don't say but, or I'm blanking on the other.
Okay, so there are some things that we shouldn't say because we don't want to say but at least this.
There you go. But or at least. We don't want to say but or at least because, anytime you find yourself saying but or at least, then you're 99% of the time probably not holding space. I know you're feeling sad, but you have a lot to be happy about. Or I know you're feeling sad, but at least you weren't one of the kids that got shot.
Because that invalidates our feelings. It says you're feeling sad and you shouldn't. And now you should feel bad about feeling sad.
Yep. So it's a double scoop.
Yeah.
Yep. And, it doesn't matter. Emotions are not a contest. Trauma is not a contest. There is always, there's always a starving child in Africa. There's always someone on the planet that has it way worse than you. And, imagine if every time we expressed an uncomfortable emotion, someone compared us to that. It's not socially productive.
Well, we roll the physical manifestation on it. If your kid comes home with a skateboard in his left hand and his right arm is broken in 3 different places, you would never say, yeah, well, but the kid down the street broke his arm in 9 places last week. You would never do that with physical medicine. We can't do that with our emotions and our mental health care, right? And say, oh, but don't feel so bad because other people have it worse. Where you're at right now is real and it's important. And so let's live that. Let's connect. And what do you think about trying to solve the problem? I'm feeling depressed. What about, okay, so let's work on that. Let's try to solve that at home.
Well, when we try to solve problems, that is oftentimes what we call a covert narcissist. I know it's uncomfortable to think about that, but it's, hey, I'm uncomfortable with the fact that you have a problem and I want to make it better. So oftentimes when we're trying to solve a problem, it's that we're taking a problem that we have and trying to make it about ourselves. Right? We're trying to be the hero, right? And we don't think this. It's not a conscious thought. It's something. I mean, every single person has done this in their life in some way or another. We are well intentioned, but we may be addressing our some narcissistic needs that we have, and sometimes it's hey, I ran out of milk. Can you help me with that problem? Great, fine. And you can be helpful. But when it's hey, I'm feeling sad. It's not a problem to be solved. It's sadness is not a problem. It's an emotion. It's an experience.
I never thought of it that way. I go off to work and so I may have had a bad day. I got in a fight with my boss and there was traffic coming home and I don't know that we're going to get to the end of the month with enough food in the refrigerator. I've got problems. And I come home and my son says, I'm really depressed. Well, now as a parent, as a narcissistic parent,
well,
I take that on.
We all have our narcissistic tendencies. That's a
right.
human condition. That's
but I take that on, and now that becomes one more problem for me. Mm-hmm. And if I can solve your problem or discount it or make it not a problem, then that's one less problem for me. But again, how very selfish of me to say, okay, now I have a problem. I'm going to try to get it done and over with. Let's hold space. Let's work through this together. I can't think of anything more loving as a parent than to stop what I'm doing and saying, all right, let's be sad. Let's not work on this, but let's just be in this moment.
And another way to sort of reframe that is it's like we all have normal, healthy, narcissistic needs.
Sure.
And so we all want to be the best parent. We all want to be the most helpful person, the best Santa Clarita person, however you want to say it. And that's valid to have those needs. But it's not our kids' jobs to help us meet those needs.
Yeah. And just again, to take the idea of competition off the plate, I want to remind our listeners, you're never going to be the best parent because that was my mom. She was the best parent ever. And don't worry about being the worst parent because my kids have assured me that that's me. So everybody else is somewhere in between. Christina, let's take another commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about the outlook for the future, what hope there is for our kids out there, because things can seem so desperate as we look forward. So let's see if we can find some hope. You're listening to a very special edition of SCVI Charter School's Eye on the Valley, Finding Closure, with licensed marriage and family therapist Christina Debray and Matt Watson on your hometown station, KHTS.
Your hometown station, KHTS.
Welcome back. You're listening to KHTS, your hometown station, 98.1 FM and 1220 AM. This is a very special edition of SCVI Charter School's Eye on the Valley, Finding Closure. I'm Matt Watson, and we're here tonight with licensed marriage and family therapist Christina Debray. Christina, before the break, you shared some real important ways that we can take care of our kids as we keep an eye on them this summer, as they're continuing to process all the trauma and grief that they've been through and kind of still continue to go through, right? And then looking, of course, as they get into next school year and beyond. I can only imagine as our kids are spending the summer sorting all these different events, and then stepping back onto the campus for the first time after, in some cases, almost 6 months in August. And so we appreciate you coming in. I mentioned in this morning's show, first of all, and I mentioned earlier this evening, my son was a senior at Saugus High School this year, so lived through the very serious reality of dealing with the shooting and everything that came afterwards. But I also have family who dealt on a firsthand basis with the Columbine shooting a couple of decades ago. I have a cousin who was there on campus and hiding from the gunshots that he could hear. He and his mother, my aunt, were instrumental in supporting my brother and I and the rest of the family following the shooting. And when we talked following the shooting, we asked my cousin, so, because we're typical guys, right? We want to do whatever it takes to get this done, to fix it and to move on, right? So we asked, how do we get over this? How do we help our kids get over this? And his response was, look, you don't get over something like this. This is something that you carry with you for the rest of your life. It's just a matter of how you deal with it. So how do we deal with this year and all these kinds of tragedies?
I hear that from time to time. This, it's not something that can be, you can get over it. And, I guess it depends on what your definition of getting over it really means. I'm someone that lived with PTSD and dealt with suicidality for over 2 decades of my life. And then I I found closure and I found peace. And what's achievable, some things we have to live with and some things we can live without. And the symptoms of trauma are something that we can live without. You do not have to live with the effects of PTSD. You do not have to live with depression, anxiety, because there are solutions to those problems. We can't erase what happened, but we can change how our mind and our body processes and stores that information, and that greatly impacts your quality of life. You do not have to be haunted by the memories of 2020 for the rest of your life. You will always know that they happened, but they don't have to be that broken record nightmare movie that plays over and over again in your head. And that's why I'm really passionate about EMDR. It's one of the only 2 treatments of choice for the treatment of PTSD. And it's important if you do decide to pursue EMDR therapy to go to the EMDR International Association.org website to find a certified therapist. But there's no such thing as a lost cause. And it's never too late. I had a colleague say to me a few years back, he was working with a lot of high school kids, and he said, Christina, I love working with the high school kids because I just feel like, it's not too late for them. We can help them. He said, for people like you and me, it's a lost cause. And I was like, whoa. I was like, I'm going to, no, speak for yourself here. I'm like, we're not lost causes. We are never a lost cause. It's never too late for us. It doesn't matter if you're 105 years old and you decide that you're ready to process your trauma and close that chapter in your life. And that's all that it is. It's a chapter in your life. And you can choose to end the book, or you can continue to make more chapters in your life. But it will not be the only chapter. And oftentimes the future chapters, can have greater meaning because of that chapter that's in there.
Please forgive me. I'm getting a little bit emotional, but it's good to hear that there is hope. So it's not something that we have to drag with us through the rest of our life. We can. I'm guessing the phrase "make sense of all these things" isn't necessarily appropriate, but there is hope, whether it's through EMDR therapy or talk therapy. It really depends on the patient, right?
Well, talk therapy is not effective for trauma.
Okay.
Talk therapy can be effective in a lot of ways, and you can learn a lot of great skills. But really, the elements of talk therapy, kind of contradict the elements of trauma therapy. So if you're in talk therapy and you feel like you sort of hit your plateau of what you're going to get, you've got what you're going to get out of it, know that there is more out there. I mean, that was me. I went to 7 different types of therapy before I found EMDR. No one even told me about EMDR. I, by chance, met the creator of EMDR and heard her presentation before she passed away last year. And after seeing all the research, I was like, hey, why hasn't anyone talked to me about EMDR? And I became really passionate about, after I reached my recovery, pursuing that professionally, and not just pursuing that, but sharing my story and telling everyone about it.
So, you talk about it pretty frequently, and it is one of the only ways, or is it the only way out there to successfully deal with trauma? I mean, because there are plenty of ways of dealing with trauma: overeating, drinking, all kinds of unhealthy ways.
Yeah. So the World Health Organization really have designated 2 types of therapy: trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy and EMDR. There is a lot of research to support that EMDR is better for complex trauma. It works more quickly than trauma-focused CBT, and it's more cost-effective. I sometimes have clients that have tried trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy and have not experienced benefits. Oftentimes it's because of the presence of complex trauma.
Okay.
But there are also a bunch of new therapies being born of EMDR therapy like brain spotting and other things that are new and not as well studied yet.
Okay. Now, is every licensed marriage and family therapist trained in EMDR therapy?
No, it took me several years to, I am trained at the highest level. So
Okay.
I'm Emdr, so I'm EMDR International Association certified therapist and an approved consultant, which means that I am certified to practice EMDR and train other professionals in EMDR.
So you're kind of a black belt. Well, this certainly is a complex issue, and we knew we weren't going to solve anybody's issues in the course of 1 hour. This isn't something that's going to be solved tonight.
This is about holding space.
Yeah, definitely. And it's good to know that we've got some things to keep an eye on. The different things that you mentioned, the yellow flags, the red flags that we can keep an eye on, and also being present and cognizant of everything that our kids have been through. This isn't just a typical teenage tantrum. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but keep your eyes on it. Christina, if people feel that they or their children do need to get some help and support, we've all got our healthcare providers, but can you give our listeners some of your information, how they can contact you?
Absolutely. So the two best ways to contact me are either call my office phone, 661-513-4857. Again, that's 661-513-4857. Or go to www.christinadebray.com. That's KRISTINA, D as in dog, E as in elephant, B as in boy, REE.com, and click the contact me, and it will send me a message.
Well, fantastic. Christina, thank you so much for all your support and time. For me as a Saugus dad, this has been really helpful, and thank you all, listeners, for joining us this evening. You know, we do our show every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m., and Christina joins us just about every day, Monday through Thursday. I also want to thank engineer Shane and Menji for pulling double duty here and being in the studio so that we can air this broadcast for you. Special thanks to Carl and Jerry Sorati Goldman for holding this space for us.
And if you like these conversations, let us know. Leave a little comment for us. We love to give you stuff that you like. We love being here for you. So reach out. Let us know. We want to have more with you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Shane. This has been SCVI Charter School's Eye on the Valley, Finding Closure, brought to you by KHTS. I'm your host, Matt Watson, with Christina Debray, licensed marriage and family therapist, and this is your hometown station, KHTS.